I mean, I've done lots of experimentation with different spatial audio technologies. Um, so 4D sound from Amsterdam, Dolby Atmos, Alisa. Um, there's a whole bunch of ambisonics, and then just lots of binaural work. So I've done lots of experimenting with different spatial audio technologies, for example, and they all have their pros and cons. And it's difficult to know which technology to spend put all your efforts into. But yeah, I've just experimented with all of them really, and they all have their strengths and weaknesses. But it's difficult. I think sometimes it's easy to spend a lot of time experimenting with something and then find out sometime down the road that it stops being used, or you have to learn something else. But I think that's just the nature of experimenting. You have to allow yourself to fail, really. It's like failing or having a dead end is accepting dead ends is really important part of the process, and something actually I probably need to be better at doing, essentially, which means I need to say to myself, I'm willing to spend the next month learning this new piece of software or this new technique, and maybe nothing will come of it, and maybe I'll never use it again, but I'm going to learn it anyway, and that's okay, because you have to. I think that's a really important part of the creative process, allowing yourself to fail, or just trying something that doesn't work. And a lot of the time it's difficult when this is our job, and we have to have deadlines and we need to finish projects, and I think that's one of the really important things is how we allow ourselves time to fail, in the context of still making some things succeed. So I think, so basically my answer is I just try and spend as much time as I can experimenting with things, and focus on having fun. If I'm enjoying learning something or enjoying a new technology, then that's the main thing. And not worrying too much about, whether that technology is going to stay or whether it's going to be useful in the end. And that's something I wish I was better at, because a lot of the time I'll just, focus on the technology that I know that, and the results, that I know that will create results easily. But I think it's important to not do that all the time. Someone always springs to mind called Rob Clouth. Rob Clouth is a guy on my Mesh label. And he's just a great experimenter. He builds his own plugins, and he's always trying new ideas and new things. And sometimes they don't work, but sometimes they do work. And he's great at just always experimenting with new technology and new ideas. And then his music, as a result, sounds so fresh and so different from everyone else, because he's building plugins himself, and he's going so deep into the experimenting with techniques that you can really hear it creatively. So he's someone I admire in that sense, who really goes deep into that. I wish I could do more of it myself. I don't know if that answers your question. I mean, I use social media every day, and all my social media more or less I do myself, but I am helped by my manager and the label manager. They help with they'll say, well, we need to announce this thing today. Can you send some words to announce it, or here's some suggested they'll say whenever we need to do things, and I'll put it into my words, but essentially I do it all myself, and then a lot of the time I just do it totally without any interaction with anyone else. So I try to keep it as personal as possible, and try to keep it as, like my music, honest as possible. I try to express, if there's something I think's interesting, I'll post it or I'll talk about it, and I just try to keep it personal and not I don't do paid stuff or ads, I don't, things like that. If I post something, it's because I really believe in it. But the downside is that it's quite addictive. These things are designed to suck our attention, and over the years of using Instagram for work, I've found that I've become programmed essentially to like if I'm waiting for a bus or something, and I've got a couple of, and then I'll be like, I'll just automatically get my phone, Instagram, looking at things, and then I don't what am I doing? It's like it becomes so Um, yeah, so automatic. So I don't like the fact that I'm a social media automaton. And I'm going to just so that I think that has negative mental health implications. That sort of also the barrage of perfection that we have to see all the time. All these amazing things, and people present this perfect vision of themselves, and then we always have to look at that all the time, which isn't very helpful for us a lot of the time. So but I have to do it for work. It's the reality of being a musician is we have to do these things. So I think I would love to not have to do it and just focus on creative work and do music and art and just release that and not have to do any social media. That would be lovely, but that's not the world we live in. So and there's great positives that come from it. We get to find each other's work and we get to collaborate. A lot of the people I collaborate with, I find their work on social media. So it's a great tool in that sense. But with anything, with all these new technologies, there's always the good side and the bad side, and we have to, try and balance them and try and be aware of our mental health along the way. Yeah, so it's an ongoing challenge. Yeah, I did one. Actually, I did that for I did an album called 100 Billion Sparks, where I went to Wales. The sort of mountains in Wales, not far for a few hours drive away, and found a little cottage on this mountainside, and then turned off all my phone and emails. Basically, totally turned off from any communication for a month, and it was such a strange experience. And I just had my synthesizers, and I worked on the music, and it was a really great. A lot of what I learned then, I still apply now in terms of my music. I learned a lot of important lessons about how to use my synthesizers and how to express myself during that time, which I probably never would have learned if I hadn't had that time totally removed from everything. But it was also really difficult. The first couple of weeks was really strange. I was not talking to anyone, and not looking at any messages, nothing. But then after 2 weeks or so, then I loved it. I was like, oh, this is so peaceful. It was really nice, and so I was so focused, in terms of my work. I was able, creatively, it was really focused and really really nice. So I'd love to do that again, and I think I'd recommend anyone to, yeah, as you say, to have some time to turn off your phone at least, or even if it's for a couple of days or something. Yeah, I'm already trying to. Yeah, I'd love to make movies. Um, but my new project, my new album coming at the end of March is a Dolby Atmos Blu-ray, so it is essentially a movie format when you put it all together. And I try to, make my album project have a narrative that when you join the visuals together, it creates a narrative. And that's what the Emergence project was like that, which we also did on a Blu-ray. And on Yearning for the Infinite. So I'd love to take the next step. Actually, that already have a project on the way, which is one more step towards a traditional movie format, but still also partly what my sort of abstract audiovisual format. So it's something I'm walking towards. But it's just you know it's so expensive to make movies. That's the problem. It's I don't have those budgets or that sort of thing. So I'm doing what I can to express myself in that way. But I love films, and that works. So I hope I'll be able to do more of that. And then in terms of other side of things, we're doing this Mesh Labs project, which is a spin-off of my Mesh label, where we're experimenting with AR projects and VR and new forms of digital art, and there's some interesting things happening there. So again, as you're saying, that's opening lots of new doors in terms of how we present art in the audiovisual art. So I'll be doing more of those projects as well. I think the early um, the early videos I did, um, the early music videos, the people I worked with, I remember Andrew Brewer um, did a video for a track called Chaotic Siri, where he put this emergence theme into this early video. Some cell life, these sort of emergence of life sort of ideas. And also Nick Cobby's video for Wasp. So these are some of my earliest music videos I did, where I was essentially, at that point in time, I was just sending people, here's a piece of music, and then they would come up with some video idea. I wasn't involved in the creative direction at that point, but they were already starting to look at science related ideas, and they were saying, oh, I've got this idea about this thing, and then I would say, oh yeah, I know about that because I've got a PhD in genetics, and so it was straight away there was that link there. And then over time I started thinking about, why don't I just, I've got all these things I'm interested in, why don't I just try and creatively direct the projects myself and write the briefs. And that was the Emergence album. The Emergence album was the first one where which was related to previous videos, and that I was like, okay, there's loads of things within this idea of emergence that I can explain to people and write these briefs. And emergence is essentially this grand scientific creation story, this simple laws, how simple laws give rise to complex systems, and how the foundations of physics works, and chemistry, and then up to biology, and how then life evolves and emerges from that, and then all the results of that. So it's this sort of creation story in the scientific realm, and that had all, I think there was 20 chapters or something in that. But that was my first, time when I decided to do it to essentially creatively direct myself. So by creatively direct, I mean I'll come up with the ideas, and I'll send the ideas to the visual artists we collaborate with, and then they'll essentially direct their video, but they're working to the brief, and I have feedback on it. So yeah, it was just a really natural thing that emerged from the process. Yeah, it came despite I was always interested in that, and I'd studied bioscience, and then my PhD was in computational biology, so I was looking at the evolution of gene networks. So these little computers essentially inside every cell that evolve over millions of years to switch genes on and off at the right times. So that was what my PhD was. I was making computer models of these evolving cells, and how they would how they would evolve to have spatial expression patterns, essentially. So within space, how they would switch on certain genes in certain spaces and certain genes in other spaces, and how they would evolve to have logic functions, in terms of their, how these genes interacted. So it was really linked to machine learning a lot, but it was also linked to biology and aesthetics. So it had a lot of things in it which were really useful when it came to this work in, this audiovisual work, this, in terms of ideas for music videos, and having an understanding of the sorts of systems involved, and being able to work with people who are technical people, like Andy Lomas, for example. He's a mathematician that does a lot of amazing emergent systems in the context of digital art. He builds, he codes these systems of cell growth that create these amazingly beautiful, intricate structures, from these basic, starting conditions. So I love chatting to Andy. He always chatting to Andy generates so many ideas. So I love working with mathematicians and people who also come from scientific backgrounds that are interested in the arts. I love that sort of that intersection between the arts and the sciences. And that's why I made the Mesh label. The idea of Mesh being to bring things together, and the whole idea of the Mesh label is to explore those intersections between the arts and the sciences and architecture and philosophy and what have you. Just how music can sit in this much wider realm, and where those crossover points are. So that's what Mesh is all about. So I've been looking for other artists who are interested in that sort of thing, and just following that general theme throughout, and it's been really productive. I think, trying to think what I've been watching recently. If there's been anything that I've watched a lot of. I think the thing I've been watching recently, one of them's the new Attenborough. I love all the Attenborough nature documentaries. Of course, they're like so so beautiful. But and then some of my favorite films that I love rewatching are the sort of Koi and Esquatsi and then Baraka and Samsara. This sequence of Ron Frick films, and the first one, Koi and Esquatsi, with Philip Glass score. They're these sort of, there's no characters or narration. It's just these beautiful audio visual sequences and storytelling through an objective viewpoint on the world, and us as sort of take outside of human society, viewing it as an alien or something, and storytelling just through audio visual spectacle. And that was Koi and Esquatsi, I think it was made in '77 or something. It's it wasn't that old, maybe it's early '80s. It's an old film, but that was one of the first things I saw where it really blew my mind and sort of opened the door to this idea that you can make a feature, a movie. It doesn't have to have any actors in it. And you can tell a story with audio and visuals. And that was something that I've taken on board, that I'm trying to do with my own projects, but I'm still aspiring towards. So I watch those films a lot. Those are something I aspire towards. I think one of my main input is science audiobooks. Really, I spend a lot, like when I'm driving or if I'm traveling. A lot of the time when I'm traveling for gigs, it's too I'll be quite tired, but I can still listen to an audiobook. Reading, when I'm really tired, reading becomes difficult, send me to sleep. But audiobooks, I find I can quite have them quite on passively, and sometimes I'll even fall asleep, I think, while I'm listening to them and wake up again. But just whenever I have a little bit of time, just constantly trying to fill my mind with really important structure. That for me, that's like philosophy of science or science, popular science books. And I just spend a lot of my time, as much as I can, trying to put useful, beautiful aesthetic, beautiful ideas into my head, so that then when I'm daydreaming, that's when the ideas start popping out. Oh, I could do a project about this. I could do a project about that. That's. But also daydreaming. That's another important one. Something that has been more difficult when I've not been touring is how to find some time to not do anything. So how to find time just to be free thinking without direction. I think that's really important as well, because that's when a lot of the ideas pop out. When my brain, when we allow ourselves to daydream, essentially. So that's something else that I'm, with lockdown, I have to try and find some time, maybe to just sit somewhere for a moment by myself, or to walk, or just to have a little bit of time away from the screen and away from phone calls and emails and and studio work, just to let the brain sort of do its thing. Then obviously exercise, trying to have some sort of exercise is important for keeping the brain going as well, and then trying to have fun. That's the other main thing for me, is like, how can I do an enjoyable project? What's the sometimes things get stressful with deadlines, and particularly recent years with financial stresses. It's been difficult for a lot of us in the creative industries. So how to get away from that stress and do a fun project where you don't have to worry about deadlines and money so much, which has been another challenge. But yeah, there's lots of things that I'm constantly battling with to try and I know what would be optimal, but the reality is you've got to do a lot of the other stuff. So it's trying to balance everything. Yeah, absolutely. There's been times recently when, yeah, I think all of us as creatives, when particularly recent years when it's been difficult, when we'd like, okay, we just have to get another thing finished. We have to get another thing finished, and always trying to push out more the work because we might get some money from that, and just go. And then you get to the point where you're not putting anything in, but you're trying to push out all the time. And then it becomes really difficult because then for me, I find that then I'll just start to rely on just doing the same techniques. Oh, I remember how I did it last time. I'll do it the same this time. That sort of thing, and it's the creativity reduces. But yeah, it's really, as you're saying, it's really important to have the input so that you have the ideas to then create the output. And yeah, it's really important, definitely. My own, I mean, just thank you for getting me involved in the project. It was great, and congratulations on what you guys are doing. And I look forward to seeing and hearing more of it. And hopefully we can keep in touch. Take care. Great. Thank you very much. Bye.